Warning, the show you are about to watch is very, very naughty. They talk about scary movies and frightening stuff and other really inappropriate things, and it's only appropriate for people over the age of 18, and frankly, even they shouldn't watch it, and if you keep watching, I wash my hands of the whole thing.
Cameras, demons, and virgin cheerleaders. Oh my! It's all coming up next on Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat. Good evening and welcome to Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat, PBDCtv's place for a fun conversation about horror movies. I'm your host, Steve the Cat. Tonight's episode is all about cameras. Still cameras, movie cameras, tonight we've got it all. We're going to start with a slasher film from the VHS-era of horror, then move on to a modern film that sounds cheesy, but has a lot more to it than meets the eye. Also, tonight we're doing not just one, but two blind box specials. Now, if you're new to the show, blind box specials are a new challenge we've taken on, where we take a movie that none of us have ever seen before and put it on the show schedule based purely upon the online description. No checking online movie reviews, no reading Wikipedia plot summaries, just the 2-sentence description that you get when you browse Tubi or Netflix or Amazon Prime. What this means is that we are committed to using a review of a film on the show no matter how good or bad it turns out to be. Back in the olden days, you picked out a film at Blockbuster just based upon what you read on the back of the box, and if you didn't like it when you got home, you were stuck with it. So this is our modern-day tribute to the ways of our youth. Anyway, tonight we're going to look at one blind box special that worked out okay, and another one that absolutely did not. But before we get to our film reviews, as many of you know, our head writer Carl got on the wrong side of a powerful psychic a few weeks back, and now has been placed under a curse. So let's do a quick check-in with Fancy the demonically possessed animatronic and get the latest on Carl's curse scorecard. So what have you got for us, Fancy?
Well, Steve, if you look at the scoreboard, it's been an up-and-down week for Carl. On Friday, he went out to lunch and there was practically no line at Wendy's, so he got his food right away. On the other hand, the food gave him an upset stomach later, so we're scoring that as a tie. He's had a crick in his neck all week, which obviously is from the curse, and, let's face it, he's only getting less attractive each day. His odor is getting worse as well. But the biggest news for this week is the annual property tax assessment on Steve the Cat headquarters. Without getting into specifics, let's just say that the assessed value of Steve the Cat headquarters went up dramatically as a result of inflation. So Carl's looking at a pretty big property tax increase this year. He's still alive, though, which is a bit surprising. We'll have to wait and see if the curse is losing strength, or if it's just playing with him before it finishes him off. That's all for now. Back to you, Steve.
Poor Carl, well on his way to his final reward in a pauper's grave. But it's his own fault for doubting the supernatural power of board games, especially Candyland. Never mess with the rules of Candyland, people. That way lies madness. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us this evening. We're really happy that you're here. Now just sit back and relax because here we go. Good evening and welcome to Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat presents Theater of Failure. I'm your host, Steve the Cat. As you may know, this is a new segment we have created for the show about the same time we came up with the idea for blind box specials. Occasionally when we do a blind box special, we come across a movie that is so bad, just so unconscionably bad, that we cannot, in good conscience, use it as one of the featured film reviews on the show, because we love our audience too much to do that to them. On the other hand, the rules of the Blind Box Challenge are that we commit to doing a review of the film on the show. So, to fill in the situations where both of those things occur, we created Theater of Failure, where we talk about the blind box specials that are just too unbearable to do as a featured film review. Tonight, we are going to talk about this film. Yes, it is called Demon Rage. This was released in 1982. It is a supernatural horror film. The cast includes Lana Wood and Britt Eklund. Britt Eklund actually had top billing. We'll talk more about that in a moment. And this film is also known as Satan's Mistress. It is also known as Demon Seed. It is also known as Fury of the Succubus, and it is also known as Dark Eyes. When a film has a half dozen different titles that it's been released under, that is rarely a sign of quality. So, what should you expect if you watch this film? Well, that's a trick question. You should not watch this film. Just assume that I took the bullet for you, I watched the film so you don't have to, and avoid this one at all costs. But, on the off chance that you should decide to try to watch it anyway, what you should expect is an incoherent supernatural horror film that promises a steamy, naughty premise, but manages to make itself unwatchable. Seriously, do not be suckered in by the mention of a sexually frustrated housewife in the description on Tubi. It is a trap. And, interestingly, Britt Eklund gets top billing in the film, but is only in about 5 minutes of the film, so let's talk about that for a second. At the time this came out, Britt Eklund still had a little bit of star power going for her, having been a Bond girl in The Man with the Golden Gun. So she got top billing in this film, even though she's not a major character in the film. Now, Lana Wood is the main character in this film. She also was a Bond girl. She played Plenty O'Toole in, I believe that was Diamonds Are Forever. It was a Sean Connery film, I know, because she says, "Hi, I'm Plenty O'Toole," and he says, "Name for your father, no doubt." But at the time this came out, Britt Eklund's star was a little higher than Lana Wood's, so Britt Eklund got top billing. But if you watch the film, most of what you're going to see is Lana Wood. Anyway, let's get into a film summary to the extent that I can summarize this piece of refuse. A married woman is sexually frustrated because her husband is completely uninterested in having sex with her. It is not clear why. I specifically wrote down in my notes, married man is angry that his attractive wife wants to have sex with him. They never really explain why. The husband is clearly psychologically abusive. If you watch this film and understand it with our modern understandings of abusive behavior and such, it is clearly not a healthy marriage, but there's no telling why he just wants to be this abusive with his wife. Anyway, demons can sense loneliness. Really. It says so at the beginning of the film. They do a little narration at the beginning of the film to explain to you point blank, demons can sense loneliness. So whether that's true or not, they establish it as the premise of the film. So the woman's loneliness attracts the attention of some form of demonic entity. And yes, I know woman's is possessive and should have an apostrophe. There is no apostrophe with this particular font, so we're just going to have to deal with the bad grammar. She starts having nightly trysts with the entity, which eventually takes on the form of a tall, bearded man. Yes, really. Something happens at the end involving fire and stuff, and the demon appears to be gone, and I cannot explain it any better than that. We'll show you some examples in a moment. Or, is the wife now possessed? And did she just kill her husband and daughter? Now, maybe I am reading too much into this. But the final scene of the film, the husband and the daughter are out in the ocean because the three of them live in a beach house, and the husband and the daughter are swimming in the ocean while Lana Wood sits in her beach chair, and you see that Lana Wood's eyes are glowing red, as if she is now possessed by the demon. And the thing is, you see the husband and the daughter laughing in the water and playing, and they both dive headfirst into the ocean, and you never see them come out again. And maybe I'm reading too much into this, but did that mean she killed the husband and the daughter? I don't know. I would say I'm interested in your opinion on it, but that would require you to watch the film, and I cannot recommend that. So, anyway, how bad is it? Well, the film goes for psychological tension, but delivers only boredom. This is not a film that goes after a lot of action, a lot of blood, a lot of kills, a lot of scares. It is mainly a psychological film, and it's just boring as all hell. Let's give you an example of what you can expect if you were to watch Demon Rage. Wasn't that fantastic? Yeah. The film just seems to be an excuse to show Lana Wood topless over and over, with some occasional writhing. And despite how that sounds, it is unbearable to watch. I mean, at the end of the day, she ain't that attractive. The film looks horrific on the screen, like watching a lot of static. It's unwatchable just in terms of the visual quality of it. And finally, the sound quality is so terrible at the end of the film that I could not understand what was going on. And I won't even try to describe this, I'm just going to give you an example. Here, let's take a look. See what I mean? Completely incoherent. So something happened with demons and fire and stuff, and then the movie was over and the demon was supposedly gone. But if you understood anything that was going on in that scene, please email me and let me know. So let's get to the scorecard for this film. Kills. There were 2, maybe 4, if I'm correct, in that the ending did imply that the wife did, in fact, kill her husband and daughter. Bare breasts. 12. That is all Lana Wood. It is not nearly as spectacular as you would think. She has areolas the size of Eggo waffles, and I just don't find that attractive. Supernatural black cats. This is actually sightings of supernatural black cats. I assume it is the same supernatural black cat every time, but there are 4. Now, the fact that I am counting supernatural black cat sightings in the scorecard for this film ought to give you an idea that not a whole heck of a lot goes on in this film, and you would not be wrong. Denogginings. There is 1. Hot tub scaldings. There is 1. Now, this is not nearly a Halloween 2 caliber hot tub scalding. This is just Britt Ekland and Lana Wood get too hot in the hot tub and have to go scrambling out of it. So, not nearly as exciting as the instuination that happens in Halloween 2. So let's get to the final word on Demon Rage. The final word is 0 paws out of 4. Do not engage. Do not be fooled. Do not fall for the mention of a sexually frustrated housewife. I don't care what Tubi says about it being about a sexually frustrated housewife. It ain't worth it. Just don't watch. Just coast on past and pick something else. A few random items from my notes that I took on this film. Just some things, and this is verbatim, some stuff that I wrote down. Number 1, most unsexy canoodling ever on film. Number 2, there is literally nothing to this film but alternating arguments and canoodling, and that is accurate. And number 3, the climax of the film just ended, and I have no idea what happened. We gave you a little clip of that. If we gave you more to give you more context, I don't think you would understand it any better. So, that is Demon Rage, 0 paws out of 4. With that, we will wrap up Theater of Failure for this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. I am your host, Steve the Cat. We'll talk to you again soon. Let's get into our first featured film review for the evening. We're going to talk about this film right here. It is called Darkroom. Yes, Darkroom, where old passions develop. This is a horror slasher film released in limited areas of Europe and limited parts of Australia in 1989, and got its wide release in the United States in 1990. So this is a film that was filmed in the very late 80s and released in the year 1990. Directed by Terrence O'Hara, with a very nice sequence of opening credits, uncredited but directed by Nico Mastorakis, who I believe is the producer of the film. And the cast includes Aaron Teach, Jill Pierce, Jeff Arbaugh, and a number of others who you have not heard of either. And, as we mentioned earlier in the show, this film is a blind box special. What that means is that we saw this film in the horror movie section on Tubi, saw that it was from the VHS era, saw that none of us had seen this movie before, and we just said, okay, we're putting this movie on the schedule for episode 8, and then we'll watch it and review it later, and we'll have to go with it no matter how good or bad the movie turns out to be. So this entire review is of a film we had never watched before committing to put it on the schedule, much like you would have had to endure back in the golden day of going to the VHS store to rent a movie. You look at the box, you rent the movie, you take it home, you don't know exactly what you're getting until you put it in the VCR and start to play. Let's get into setting your expectations for this film. What you should expect is a conventional but reasonably enjoyable slasher or serial killer film from the late 80s. If you like Friday the 13th, you might like this movie, but really, if you like any of the 80s era slasher films that are whodunits, and I put down Pieces here just because that was the first one that came to mind where it's an 80s style film and the killer's a whodunit. The original Friday the 13th was kind of a whodunit before they just decided, oh, we'll just make Jason Voorhees the killer and everyone will know ahead of time. A number of slasher films in the 80s were whodunits where you didn't know who the killer was until the end. This is of that school of thought. So, let's talk about calibrating your expectations for this film. This is the scale we typically use. On the far left side of the scale, very campy films such as Jason X. On the far right side of the scale, very serious films such as The Silence of the Lambs. Now, understand this scale is not an assessment of the quality of the movie. This scale is an indicator of what your mindset needs to be going into the movie if you're going to enjoy it, because you don't want to go into a comedy expecting a serious movie. You don't want to go into a serious movie expecting a comedy. It will ruin your enjoyment of the film. This film is more or less right down the middle, a little bit off to the campy side of the spectrum just because it is an 80s slasher film, so it may have been straight down the middle at the time of release, but now with the 80s fashions and 80s hairstyles and everything else, it as a matter of course gets moved a little bit over to the left side of the spectrum. So it's not intended as a comedy, but it's not a real deep film either. It's more or less a popcorn film. Before we go any farther, we need to do a vocabulary lesson. This, of course, is the part of the episode where we talk about new and innovative words and phrases in an effort to stay ahead of social media bots and algorithms that would otherwise try to ban our conversation. The social media bots and algorithms are always evolving, therefore we must evolve as well. 2 terms for this film. Our first term, phonenklanking, or maybe if you're Swedish, frunenklunking. This is a noun referring to the action in a horror movie of one character pummeling another character using a telephone as a weapon. Colloquial forms of this include ma belling and dial toning. For obvious reasons, this was more common in horror movies back in the 80s than it is now. It's really difficult to beat somebody to death with a little Samsung cell phone. Our second term is shameful reverse Eastwooding. Now, this is a slang expression more so than a term, but it is a slang expression referring to the action of a law enforcement officer being overpowered, having his weapon taken away, and then being shot with his own weapon. So, please keep these terms in mind. They will become important later in the episode. So let's get into a summary of the film Darkroom, where old passions develop. Well, 20-something Janet returns home to her parents' farm to visit her mother, grandfather, 2 sisters, and 2 cousins. Now, at some point prior to the story taking place in the movie, a mysterious fire happened, and Janet's father and Janet's aunt and uncle were all killed in that fire, and that is why her 2 cousins live with her family as if they are her brothers, even though they are her 2 cousins. She brings her boyfriend Steve, a photographer, along for the trip, and his terrifying mullet. The day after their arrival, Janet and Steve set out to find her sister Paula, who did not show up at the house the day before and they believe is in a snit in an argument with her mother and appears to have run off with her boyfriend. But what the pair soon discover is that Paula, as well as the nearest neighbors, have been brutally murdered by somebody who also takes photographs of his victims. And whoever the killer is, who takes photographs of his victims, is now stalking the rest of them. And this leads us, of course, to our villain profile for this film. So our villain is... well, our villain doesn't have a name because this is a whodunit, and there's really not enough that's iconic about the killer in this film to give him any kind of a nickname. You could call them creepy shadow photographer killer person, but that's about it. This is about all you get to see in the film, is a creepy person in the shadows, and then you get to see people reacting to the killer, but you don't get to see the killer's face. Anyway, the mystery killer is of the slasher serial killer class. His or her powers consist of stealth and photography skills, and his or her signature weapon is various, uses a number of weapons throughout the film, but special attention is paid to the enthusiastic application of a hatchet in the opening of the film. So let's talk about the things I liked about this film. Right off the bat, this is an above-average entry into the crowd of late 80s slasher films, and frankly, it was better than I expected. I expected to not like this film or not think much of it. I expected for this to be something like Sledgehammer or Rocktober Blood. This film was actually pretty well done, so much better than I expected. The lead actress in particular does a reasonably good job given the role she was provided. Something I talked about last season, how in the movie Terrifier, I thought Jenna Cannell really rose above the part that she was given. Something similar in this film happens as well. The lead actress bears more than a little resemblance to Alexandra Daddario, who is a member of our Scream Queen Hall of Fame and who was featured in the second ever episode of Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat. There is plenty of 80s authentic nostalgia in this film, and like we've talked about before, it's authentic 80s nostalgia because it's undiluted and taken directly from the 80s. This is not a retro piece that was made later. This is not Stranger Things shot in the 2020s, but intended to look like it was shot in the 80s. This really was shot in the 80s, so all the 80s nostalgia is authentic. And the direction is stylistic, and the direction is better than you would expect from a routine 80s slasher film. And I mentioned that opening sequence of credits. I don't know why, but they did just... you have to watch the film to appreciate it. They just did a really thorough, interesting job with the opening sequence of credits for this film. But overall, the direction for this film is better than you would expect in an 80s slasher film. Things that could have been better... well, it starts out pretty good, but loses steam in the second half. As so many of these films do, it loses steam in the second half. It becomes, I won't say it becomes incoherent, but it just becomes a little choppier and a little messier and a little more rushed. At the end of the day, the film is nothing special. There's nothing to it that's iconic or memorable. So it's a pretty enjoyable film. It's pretty well directed, but it's one of those things that it's like the old myth about Chinese food that an hour later you're hungry again. An hour later, you're not going to remember a whole lot about this movie. There's nothing iconic about the killer. There are no iconic kills. There are no iconic jump scares. There are no iconic images that are going to stand out in your mind afterwards. It's just going to... you'll remember the title, you'll remember, yeah, I watched that, it was okay, and that's about all you will remember about this film. Many of the kills are off-screen, which is kind of necessary in order to keep the identity of the killer a secret. I'm sure it also simplifies the special effects for the film as well. Although the direction is competent, the editing is a bit shaky with out-of-sync dialogue, so the dialogue is a little out of sync with the mouth movement, which is something that we are very familiar with here on Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat. But hey, we do this show for free, and we're still learning. The film does not seem to generate as much tension or suspense as it should, and it feels like it's going through the motions, so it's just kind of a, okay, here's the beginning, here's the middle, here's the end. It just doesn't seem to have as much tension and as many jump scares as you would expect them to try to bake into a slasher film. And finally, the whodunit is not too hard to figure out. Now, I'm not going to tell you whodunit, even though I could. You will probably figure it out fairly early on yourself. It's not that difficult to figure out, but for the sake of this being a no spoilers review, I will not tell you whodunit. So let's get to Steve's scorecard for this film. Kills, I counted 9. Bare breasts, I counted 2. Yes, there is one shower scene with Janet. Axing clonking. Now, I've put asterisks here. There are 2 people who are killed with a hatchet, enthusiastic application of a hatchet, but the deaths happen off screen. You see them scream, you see the shadow of the killer and the hatchet swing, and then you see stuff flying. You don't actually see anyone getting hit with a hatchet, so we will give them credit for 2 off-screen axing clonkings, even though we don't see them. Phone-in clonking. Yeah, you definitely get one of those. Somebody gets walloped with a telephone in this film. Shameful reverse Eastwoodings. Yeah, things do not work out so well for the sheriff in this film. And finally, burning down the house, which I'm guessing you don't need me to actually define for you. There is one house burned down in this film. There are also a number of bonus features with your viewing of Darkroom, such as, and all around the world, everyone from Generation Z asks, what's a darkroom? You get surprisingly well done opening credits. I've mentioned that before. I just put it in the bonus features in case I forgot to mention it earlier in the film. It's almost weird. It's like, why did they put so much effort into an opening credit sequence? And then you understand it was done by a different director, so it's not really taking time away from the main production. They were probably done in parallel. You would think a creepy stalker would have a quieter camera. Yeah, the creepy stalker's camera has a pretty noisy shutter. You get Steve's gigantic 80s hair. Yes, Steve has a terrifying mullet in this film. You get a country girl who is terrified of spiders. Yes, Janet is terrified of spiders despite having grown up on a farm in the country. You get a country girl who sleeps in a thong. Sure. You get underwear theft action. You get authentic 80s incidental music, which may be good, may be bad, depending upon your perspective on music from the 1980s. You get moped action, and where you get moped action, you are sure to get moped tackling action. Yes, the rider of the moped is tackled straight off of his moped because mopeds only move at about 3 miles an hour. And finally, you get some cousin groping action. I did have one more bonus feature on here, but I just removed it right before I started recording this because it would give away the identity of the killer, so you'll just have to figure that out for yourself. So Steve's final score for this film, we're going to give it 2.5 paws out of 4. We're going to say this is an above average, but ultimately forgettable entry into the 80s slasher film genre. It does most things pretty well, with decent acting and above average direction, but it lacks any iconic moment or any iconic image to make it memorable. And we've talked about films like this before where it's like the journeyman baseball player or journeyman football player who has a really good career but is not really Hall of Fame caliber at anything. They just do everything well and they can always find a team that needs them. This is a film that does everything pretty well, so it puts out a pretty enjoyable film at the end of the day, but it's not memorable. It's not something like Nightmare on Elm Street where you're going to remember the razor claws. It's not something like Alien where you always remember the chest burster scene. There's nothing iconic in this film to really stick to your memory. But as blind box specials go, I was surprisingly good film. Above average in context of everything else, but considering that we just picked it out, blindly, I'm pretty happy with it. So that is Steve's final score for Darkroom.
And now a word from our benevolent overlords at PBDCtv, your nightly heartbeat of horror.
Amber is a theater major. I gotta go. I'll be back.
So it's a horror film. Would you be interested?
Yeah, for sure. You've seen my tits. You've heard me scream. Do I get the part?
Okay, let's get into our final featured film review for the evening. We are going to talk about this film, yes, Virgin Cheerleaders in Chains. Yes, that is really the title of the film. This is a horror comedy mockumentary released in the year 2018, directed by, and I'm sure I will mispronounce this, but directed by Paulo Biscaya Filho and Gary McLean Ganaway, who also wrote the script. And the cast includes Kelsey Prabilski, Elizabeth Maxwell, and Ezekiel Z. Swinford, amongst a host of others whom you have not heard of either. So, let's get into setting your expectations for this film. If you're going to sit down and watch Virgin Cheerleaders in Chains, it is not what you expect. From that title, you would expect it to be porn, and you would be very, very wrong. Virgin Cheerleaders in Chains actually is a horror mockumentary about friends making a low-budget horror movie. Or, hang on a minute, or is it a mockumentary about friends making a low-budget mockumentary about making a horror movie? So are there two layers to it, or are there three? Is it a movie within a movie, or is it a movie within a movie within a movie? It's actually very interesting. If you like They're Watching, which is a found footage horror comedy we have talked about on this show before, you'll like this. If you like This Is Spinal Tap, you will probably like this one. This one's kind of hard to categorize because the premise is, on the one hand, you know, the whole idea of people are filming a horror movie and people start getting killed for real has been done a million times, but no one has done it like this. So it's kind of hard to find a comparable film, but if you like They're Watching that we did a couple of years ago, which involved a home improvement TV show traveling to Moldova and terrible things happening, you might enjoy this one. And if you enjoy This Is Spinal Tap, just for the mockumentary comedy side of it, you should enjoy Virgin Cheerleaders in Chains. So let's get into calibrating your sights for this. This is the scale we like to use. On the far left side of the scale, very campy films such as Jason X. On the far right side of the scale, very serious films such as The Silence of the Lambs. As always, this scale is not an indicator of the quality of the film. This scale is an indicator of what your mindset needs to be going into the film if you are going to enjoy the film. This is to make sure you do not go into a comedy expecting it to be a period piece drama or vice versa. Virgin Cheerleaders in Chains is a comedy. It is about as far to the left as you can go. It's not quite as ridiculous as some horror comedies. It's not quite as over the top as something like, say, The Night Watchman. It's not nearly as violent as The Night Watchman. The humor is more subtle, but it is absolutely a comedy and not intended to be taken seriously. So keep that in mind if you watch the film. It is absolutely a comedy. It is not meant to be taken seriously. It is supposed to be fun. Now, before we go any farther, we need to do a vocabulary lesson. This, of course, is the part of the show where we discuss new and innovative words and phrases in an effort to stay ahead of social media bots and algorithms that are otherwise trying to ban our conversation. We're going to do 2 words for this film, terms we've done before. First is long division. Now, this is something we talked about last season when we did Terrifier with Art the Clown. So to review, long division is a noun referring to the process of dividing a character into 2 symmetrical halves along its long axis. Colloquial forms of this include going halfsies, great dividing, and Dutch treating. Now, the most famous example of this, obviously, is from Terrifier with Art the Clown hanging the blonde upside down and then sawing her in half with a hacksaw vertically. There's also an example from the movie Wrong Turn 2, which we did last year, where Kimberly Caldwell gets hit on the head with an axe and basically split all the way right down the middle, falls down into 2 halves. That is long division. Our second term, and one we have done several times this season, I believe, tree felling. Tree felling is a noun referring to the act in a horror movie of one character killing another character using a chainsaw. It's pretty amazing that we have made it to season 3 of this show before I actually had to come up with a term for killing somebody with a chainsaw. Colloquial forms of this, of course, include lumberjacking and releasing the woodsman. Please keep these terms in mind. They will become important later in the episode. So let's get into a film summary for Virgin Cheerleaders in Chains. In this film, Shane has written an amazing horror movie script, but he cannot get a studio to bite. From the way he describes it later in the film, it's a $100 million project, so it's one of those things that's going to require a lot of money, and it's an original story, so none of the studios want to touch it because no studio wants to spend a lot of money on an original story. They only want to spend that kind of money on reboots and sequels and such. So even though he has won awards for this script and such, he absolutely cannot get anyone to buy it. So, Shane and his girlfriend Chloe, along with several of their friends, have a brilliant solution. They'll write a new script and film it themselves. So they raise a little bit of money, team up with some local talent, and begin filming at a creepy abandoned orphanage outside of town. What exactly do I mean when I say team up with some local talent? Well, let's take a look.
How's the harem?
You know, same old, they come, they go. Jessica last week, Tiffany the week before, I mean, poof, no call, no nothing. Yeah, by the way, I ran into Brian last week, virgin cheerleaders. Well, it's fucking brilliant.
Actually, that's why we're here. Do you have any strippers that have acting experience?
Are you kidding me? Every pole dance is a one-woman show. Do you guys believe in serendipity?
Well, guess why?
Eyes on the stage.
Yes, they did hire her straight out of the Gentleman's Club. But that is Elizabeth Maxwell. She's actually very, very good in this film. That night at the orphanage, the cast and crew begin being hunted and killed for real. Wait, hang on. Is that right? Or is it a movie about people making a movie where the cast and crew of a horror movie are hunted for real? Again, is it 2 layers or is it 3? It's 3. But if you're not careful, you can get lost as to which layer you're watching. So let's get into the villain profile for this film, which again is kind of hard to pin down because it's like, is this 2 layers? Is this 3? Is there really a villain, or are these all actors? Mike Beale is the villain in this film, and there he is with his power drill. There he is in his video rental store. Mike Beale is of the independent movie director and video store owner turned cannibal killer class. I had to make that class up. This is not something you see in too many movies. His special powers include stealth and the ability to recruit like-minded accomplices. And his signature weapon is, well, he uses multiple weapons throughout the film, but most memorably a power drill. Yes, there is a pretty awesome power drilling in this film. So let's get into the things that I liked about this film, and I'm going to say right now, I really enjoyed this film. It's not for everybody, but I really enjoyed this film. I've already watched it several times. The film is very inventive. It's a very inventive take on an otherwise familiar story. So, plenty of movies have been done about people, mockumentaries about people making a movie. Plenty of movies have been done about a killer stalking the crew of a movie or a television series, but no one has really done something like this, where they're making a mockumentary about the making of a movie where the cast and crew who are filming a horror movie are hunted by a killer. So I've never seen anything with 3 layers like this before. I found the film intelligently funny. It is more subtle than slapstick. So know that going in. This is not the kind of thing that's got lots of pratfalls and physical humor to really crack you up. The humor is a little more subtle, but it is, if that's your thing, it is very funny. The cast is largely likable, and the acting is decent for a low-budget film. And following up on that, Kelly Prabilski and Elizabeth Maxwell, whom you saw dancing with the stripper pole, are particularly good in the film. Although the film never takes itself seriously, it is actually scary when it needs to be, although that is not often. But there are some scenes in the film where you don't know yet, okay, is what I'm watching real or is this part of a film? And they play it like it's real and play it like it is scary. They find some, through the course of the movie, They find some snuff film tapes, and those look very realistic and very scary. So the movie is scary when it needs to be, which is not very often. It primarily is a comedy, so it doesn't depart from being a comedy for very long. And finally, Elizabeth Maxwell knows how to work a stripper pole. Now, interestingly, she does keep her clothes on throughout her entire routine, but she knows how to work a stripper pole. And I thought about inserting a clip of this in here, but decided not to go that way, just to not be the complete misogynist. Anyway, those are the things I liked about this film. Let's talk about things that could have been better about this film. Well, right off the bat, if you don't like horror comedy mockumentaries, this is not the film that's going to change your mind. So if that's not your thing, just say the joke is not intended for me and don't watch. If you don't buy into the film's layered premise, you likely won't enjoy it. If you're one of those people that doesn't want to think too much, you're not going to enjoy this one. If you just want to see, Leatherface wander onto a bus and cut up a bunch of people with a chainsaw, this is not the movie for you. If you do not pay attention, you can lose track of what layer you are in, and I say that based upon experience. The first time I watched this film, I only thought it was 2 layers, and it was only upon rewatching it that I realized that there were 3. Now, you can enjoy the film anyway, as long as you just sit back and enjoy it, and enjoy the fact that it's a comedy. You don't have to worry too much about which layer of the film you're in, but you can lose track of where you are if you are not careful. It's about 40 minutes in before anything scary happens, so it is a horror comedy, and it is just basically a comedy about making a movie for the first 40 minutes before scary stuff really starts happening. And the film is low budget, and a number of the kills look fake. But that's because they're supposed to look fake. When you have kills that you know are in a movie that's within a movie, they're supposed to look fake because you're watching a movie about people making a movie, and you know that those kills are fake. So some of the kills in the film look fake. Some of them look very realistic. So let's go to Steve's scorecard for this film. Kills, I counted 12, and that includes dogs. Bare breasts. Now, you would think a movie called Virgin Cheerleaders in Chains is going to be replete with a lot of bare breasts, and you would be so wrong. I only saw one, and that's kind of in like a dream sequence, and it's like a weird kind of psychedelic close-up. So Elizabeth Maxwell, although she works a stripper pole very well, you never see her goodies. Denoggening. You get 1 denoggening in this film. Instabinatings. You get a couple of instabinatings. Yes, there is somebody who likes to collect digits in this film. Bosom augerings. Now, this is a term from last season. Basically, this involves putting a power drill through the torso. Yeah, there's one of those, and it is spectacular. Bear traps. Yeah, they managed to work a bear trap into this film. Long division. You figure there's going to be at least one because we talked about it in the vocabulary lesson earlier, and you would not be wrong. There is one. And tree felling. You would assume that there's going to be at least one in the film. And again, you would not be wrong. There are, in fact, 2 tree fellings in this film. But that is not all. With your viewing of Virgin Cheerleaders in Chains, you get a number of bonus features, including vicious cat rescue action. Yes, Shane tries to rescue his neighbor's cat from the roof. Not the smartest move. You get white Rastafarian action. You get strip club action, although you never actually see any stripping, but you do see some lovely ladies working the pole. Is that seriously a movie rental store in 2018? Yeah, I guess you can go with the idea that it's a small town and small towns still have video rental stores, but it's kind of funny. You get band fundraiser action. The band ends up playing a not insignificant role in this film, or at least one member of the band. You get Don't Call Me Shirley. So going back to, is it the early 80s or the late 70s when Airplane came out? I think it was the early 80s, and you had the joke, "Surely you can't be serious." I am serious, and don't call me Shirley. Multiple times throughout the course of this film, somebody says, "Don't call me Shirley." So you've got to love the callbacks to Airplane, even though these people are far too young to have been around when Airplane originally came out, so I salute them for that. Dad, cut them some slack. They were English majors. Yes, somebody really says that in the film. I just cracked up. You get a man who tries to assuage his jealous girlfriend by saying to her, "Come on, you know I like small boobs." It works exactly as well as you would expect it to. You get human stew action. You get a fridge full of body parts. You get electric fence action. And finally, I hate exposition, which is a pretty funny joke in the film because you have the guy writing the script saying, "Oh, I hate exposition." And literally right from that, there is a jump cut to somebody giving a bunch of exposition. And it's just, I thought it was hysterical. It depends upon whether you like subtle humor or not. I thought it was very funny. So let's get to Steve's final score for this film. I was on the fence, 2.5 paws or 3. I'm going to give it 3. I was on the fence, but gave this 3 paws because it is creative, and I know I will go back to watch it again. It is inventive and funny. It is also low budget with mediocre production values. If you like the premise, you will enjoy the film. If not, you will not be impressed and you may find it confusing. So this is one of those films where you have to know going in if it's your sort of thing or not. It is a horror comedy mockumentary. When you see the title Virgin Cheerleaders in Chains, you're thinking it's going to be some exploitation, torture porn kind of thing. It is not. It is a horror comedy mockumentary about some people filming a movie called Virgin Cheerleaders in Chains. If that's your kind of thing, I think you will enjoy this film a lot. I certainly enjoyed it a lot. Anyway, that is Steve's final score for Virgin Cheerleaders in Chains. We've reached the end of another episode of Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat, but before we go, we're going to take just a moment to talk about some other things we watched this week. We're going to go around the horn, and you're going to hear from several of us. I'm going to go first. This is Steve the Cat, and this week I watched a film called Satanic. I found this free with ads on Tubi. This is a teen supernatural horror film from 2016. Now, when I say teens, this is actually college teens. This is an R-rated film, so this is not teen as in targeted at 13-year-olds. Anyway, in this film, 4 friends on their way to Coachella, of course, make a stop in LA to do some horror tourism, visiting various sites such as the site of the Manson murders. Yes, a couple of people in this quartet are serial killer buffs and just want to go to everywhere a serial killing has happened. While on this tour, they cross paths with a satanic cult, as people are wont to do when they are on vacation. Terrifying things start to happen soon after. Now, this film features Sarah Hyland, who is most famous from being on Modern Family. And I will say, this was a decent horror film of the teens get into supernatural shenanigans variety. It was nothing special, but it wasn't bad. I mean, I enjoyed it just as much as I've enjoyed it, any other average film. It is much better than the IMDb rating would indicate. This film has an unusually low IMDb rating. Most decent horror movies that I find on Tubi, are in the 4-point-something range. This had a score below 4, and I'm not sure why. Maybe too many people who were fans of Modern Family tried to give this a try and were mortified because it's a horror film, but it is better than that would indicate. I would say it's middle of the road to slightly above average. I would recommend it if you've got no other plans. So that is Satanic, and now we're going to hand the microphone over to Crimson Meerkat.
Hello, this is, just call me Crimson Meerkat. That's my code name. Yes, Crimson Meerkat. I am a specialist in all things conspiratorial. I am the leader of the scientific endeavor known as Project Brevity, and I also am contractually obligated to review horror films for PBDCtv from time to time, which is well below my intellectual station, but what are you gonna do? I signed the contract. So, this week, I watched a film called Moth. Yes, really, it's called Moth. I found this free with ads on Tubi. It's a 2016 film. It's a kind of sort of found footage film. It's not really found footage, but it kind of feels like a found footage film. In this film, a college professor and one of her students travel to the European countryside to investigate reported Mothman sightings. Yes, really, it says that in the description, European countryside, as if Europe is a country. Europe is a continent, people. And oh, by the way, Mothman is not real, get over it. Anyway, they become lost in the European countryside, and then are terrorized by something. For crying out loud, just say it's Hungary already. We know it's Hungary. It says in the credits it was filmed in Hungary. We all know this is Hungary. Anyway, I digress. The point is, the film is not good. It is not well acted. It is not well directed. It is not interesting, and it is not scary. Now, there is a twist at the end of the film that might have been interesting in a better film. But not here. Not in this film. No, I do not recommend Moth. It is available free with ads on Tubi, but it is not worth the investment of your time. Admit it. You thought you were finished with me. No. This is Crimson Meerkat once again to talk about the second film that I was assigned to review this week. Yes, apparently some of the powers that be at PBDCtv are unhappy with some of these snide comments that they claim I have made during my reviews. So I was given a second film to watch. Against my will, I was forced to watch a film called Chillerama. This again is available free with ads on Tubi, so once again at least I didn't have to pay to watch this. This is a raunchy horror comedy from the year 2011, and when I say raunchy, it is indescribably raunchy. It is so raunchy. This is directed by Adam Green, who is most well known for the Hatchet series. He also directed the film Digging Up the Marrow that we reviewed on the show not too long ago. This is an anthology. In this film, a collection of short horror films are aired at a drive-in theater on its final night. Oh, and there's a zombie outbreak developing at the same time. The shorts are all spoofs of classic monster genres, and each one is done in a different style. There's one that kind of feels like an old American-type kaiju movie, like the Steve McQueen version of The Blob. There's one that is black and white and very much like the old Frankenstein. There is one that is about werewolves, but it kind of feels like a mashup of Werewolves, Grease, and West Side Story. Some of the bits were funny, I must admit. The black and white spoof on Frankenstein I found especially funny, but the film eventually got so crude and raunchy that I could not finish the film. So, you know who you are, people. You're all adults. If you like really crude, raunchy films, give this one a try. If you cannot handle crude, raunchy films, do not give this one a try. Do not be ashamed to bail out if it's more crude and raunchy than you can handle. But that is Chillerama, available free with ads on Tubi, and that is the other film I was forced to watch this week.
That wraps up another episode of Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you enjoyed the show. And as always, if you enjoyed the show, please take a moment to give us a like and a share. The biggest thing you can do to help us out is to share this broadcast. Also, please feel free to leave a comment about the films we discussed tonight, or maybe tell us about your own favorite, or maybe tell us about the worst horror movie you ever rented. If you would like to stay up to date on our latest videos, then please take a moment to stop by and check us out on social media. And remember to hit that subscribe button. You can find Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat on Facebook, YouTube, and Rumble. And yes, that's Tales spelled with an A-I-L-S. Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat is just one of the shows you can find on the PBDCtv Broadcast Collective. If you're interested in horror, true crime, weird history, creepy stories, or unexplained events, then PBDCtv is sure to have something for you. You can find us online at pbdctv.com, and you can also find us on Facebook, YouTube, and Rumble. We'll be back again next week with 2 more films, including one from the VHS era of horror, so be sure to drop back by then. Once again, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate all the support. Everyone stay safe and have a great week. We'll see you again soon. Good night, everybody.